What's up guys, welcome to Talking Poodoo, a Star Wars show where today I'm talking all about and reviewing Star Wars Shadowfall by Alexander Freed, the latest book in the Alphabet Squadron trilogy, the second book in the trilogy. So it follows up from Alphabet Squadron. The squad is assembled now, they're on the hunt for Shadowwing, an evil TIE fighter squadron that they're trying to track down and eliminate because, well, they're causing some bother. And this takes them to the planet of Troth or Troif, don't know how it's pronounced, but it's a city planet. They mention how it used to be a bit like Coruscant before Coruscant took over. And yeah, that's kind of where this book sets things up, in that they are on this planet trying to take it away from the Empire while also setting a trap for Shadowwing to lure them in and take them out. What did I think of this book? It's okay. As a follow-up to Alphabet Squadron, and I can't remember exactly what I said about Alphabet Squadron, although you can check that out on my YouTube channel, it's disappointing as a follow-up to Alphabet Squadron. I remember liking Alphabet Squadron quite a bit. It was a really good setup for a trilogy. This one is a bit of a step back in that regard. This one I do think suffers a bit from repetition and just being a little overly long. And one of the problems is the location, Troif. Yes, it's an interesting location, but at the end of the day, it's a city planet. It's like Coruscant, just less interesting than Coruscant because we don't really know what it looks like. It's just a city. And primarily that's where this book takes place. You do go to a couple of little places here and there, but they're mainly like abandoned moons and deserts and stuff like that. This is not a grand like Star Wars adventure, this is a very focused location Star Wars adventure. And those are the ones which I always kind of struggle with. Because what I like from a Star Wars novel or comic book or whatever else it is for it to evoke the feeling of the movies. And the movies are these big epic adventures that these characters go on. They go to these magical, fantastical worlds and locations. And yet this one is just in a city planet. So that's a little disappointing. Another issue I had with this is the approach to it. The Alexander Freed, he's done a few Star Wars books now, and he's very clearly got a style and an approach, and that he focuses on the military. It's very militaristic, looking very much at the lower rank military and what they're doing, and goes over about like strategy and tactics and stuff like that. Well, that's all well and good, but the problem is it's not always entertaining. So a lot of the action scenes, for example, are getting bogged down by like military strategy and terminology and so on and so forth. That it kind of takes away some of the fun factor of it. Some of the action scenes are fun, some of them are enjoyable, but by being so militaristic at times, there is an essence of them that's being taken away, that's being robbed of the enjoyability factor. And they can sometimes be a little convoluted and incomprehensible. And it's worth saying that this could just be me reading the book, being a total idiot, not understanding half the things that's going on, rather than the fault of the book itself. One of the things that Alexander Freed does in this trilogy in particular, which is something that he done in Alphabet Squadron, and it's carried on here, is that he's got a big focus on the characters rather than the story. The story is very simplistic. They are trying to track down and eliminate Shadowwing. That's it. The characters are very much the main focus. He has a way of diving into their psyches, looking into their motivations, their past and their backstory, their regrets, things they've done in the past that they wish they didn't do, or things that they're dwelling on. And he does this a lot. So much so that he kind of runs out of things to say about them about halfway through the book, which is disappointing. Because over and over again, Erica Kell keeps bringing up the fact that, oh, she did this thing in the past and it's eaten away at her and it's a big guilty regret of hers. That's all great, it makes sense to repeat it a bit here and there, but he's never saying anything new about it really, and he does it a bit too much. And at the end of the day, by repeating it more than necessary, you're taking up more time, you're making the book longer, and it doesn't need to be. You could just use that time to actually progress the story and get further in. But I do like the exploration of their motivations, of their psyche. I do like to find out what makes them tick. It does make them very interesting characters. I just wish there was something else going on beyond what these little moments that keep coming back, like Chaz Chadek, who is an alcoholic who's suicidal and has big regrets and is trying to find a way forward. And when you've got Erika Kell, who's got this big moment from her past which she wishes didn't happen, or that's dwelling on her. There should be just more there. It can't just be these events. It's also worth saying that I think the story is a little on the slow side this time. Again, it is primarily set in one location, so it does kind of feel like some of it's being stretched out to fill this book. I do think it gets better in the second half. Once you actually get the plan together to entrap Shadowwing and to lure them in, that's when things really start to click into place. And then that leads into the third act, which is basically just a big action scene. And there is this key action moment when the plan is coming together, and when things are, without spoiling it, things aren't exactly going the way they planned, but some things are, and there's just chaos all over the place, there's destruction, there's lots of ships going all over around there. That's probably the most pivotal moment of this book, where there's a huge action moments, but then mixed in with these huge character moments when, again, not going into spoilers, but there's a big revelation about one of the characters at this point. And that affects what everyone thinks of this character and the story going forward. So that works really well, and it makes for a really cool, interesting, second act, which leads into the third and final act. One of the things I praised the first book, Alphabet Squadron, about is that I felt like it was adding to the Star Wars canon and the mythos in interesting, cool ways. It showed us what happened to the Empire and the Rebellion after Return of the Jedi. We have seen bits of this in other books and comics and so on, but this one really dived into the military side of things and how the war was continuing. And I liked that a lot. I felt like it was establishing the core, the ground, the fundamentals of a new interest and area of Star Wars. This book doesn't do that quite so much. And again, that is because it's just set in one location, because it is so focused on one thing. So this one does feel less important and less significant to the overall Star Wars canon, which is disappointing. So to talk a little bit more about the characters, the side characters. These side characters are problematic because they aren't as well developed as the main characters. Naturally, you've only got so much time and space to do that in. But the problem is there are a lot of side characters, and there's a lot of hard to pronounce names and a lot of weird names and lots of alien species coming in, so it's really hard to keep track of who's who, what they look like, what their role is, to the point where it's just they're just words eventually. And that's a little disappointing, but it is understandable. Maybe the author, Alexander, should have cut back a few times on who the names were and who these characters were a little bit more. Instead of giving them unique names and identities, maybe just saying, Pilot 1 or something like that. It might have simplified things a little bit, I don't know. It's a tough thing to do. The villain. In the first book, the villain, called Devan in the first book, was kind of moving on from the Empire, trying to establish his own way in the galaxy after the fall of the Empire. This time he's turned back and he's gone back to the Empire. He's leading this Shadowwing against Alphabet Squadron, and I think he's a fascinating character. But again, everything else about this book, I feel like the author doesn't have much to say about this character. This character is dwelling on things, and it's being very repetitive, turning him into an almost one-note villain at times. Yes, he's smart. Yes, he's working for the Empire, and he's doing what the Empire expects of him, but he's got his own motivations that's a bit different from the Empire. He realizes that the Empire's doomed, he realizes that the Empire's gone, and it won't ever be the same again. And that kind of sets him apart from the usual villains. But that's all it really is. And in many ways, he's also trying to redeem himself from the fact that he was walked away from the Empire and now he's back. So I do think he's a fascinating villain. I do like him. But again, I don't think this book has too much to say about him. And his focus is purely on getting rid of Alphabet Squadron, saving Troyf, and moving on and help rebuild the Empire. He's so focused on this. That's all his stuff ever really concerns about. That's all he ever really does in this book, is he tries to achieve that goal of getting rid of Alphabet Squadron and taking down Harrison Dula in particular. At the same time though, there are some key characters from the first book which are really underutilized in this one. So Ken Adon, the strategic mind behind Alphabet Squadron, the New Republic spy of sorts, the intelligence officer, he is underutilized here. And I think he's one of the most interesting characters in the first book and in this book, and yet here we don't see too much of him. In fact, here he spends most of his book worried about Kairos, who's another character who is actually barely in this book at all. She was one of the more fascinating elements of the first book because we didn't find out so much about her. She was a really mysterious, elusive character in the first book, and in this one, she only appears like 2 or 3 times throughout the entire book, and she spends most of this book unconscious, without going into spoilers. So that's really disappointing that these 2 characters, 2 of the best things about the first one, are just like throwaway characters just popping in here and there in this one. That's super disappointing in my opinion. Although there is a key moment where it dives into both of their backstories, how they're connected, what brought them together, and that's really interesting and fascinating. And while I was saying that I feel like the author's running out of things to say, I don't necessarily think that's true for every character or every situation. I think there are some key things that he's deliberately not revealing right now because he's saving them for the next book, which can be a little frustrating because there are ways in which that could have been put in here, but then maybe they wouldn't have made a great next book or whatever. But yeah, there are some key things that will be revealed eventually that I am looking forward to finding out the answers for. And as a middle book of a trilogy, it is just okay. It's disappointing compared to the first one, but it's not bad by any means. I did enjoy it, and I do recommend it if you read the first one. And I'm looking forward to the next one. And that's my thoughts on Star Wars Shadowfall. I'm going to go into a few spoiler points in just a moment. If you haven't read this book, then go read the book, obviously. Then come back and watch the rest of this, unless you're a madman, in which case just watch it anyway. And, of course, if you're going to leave and read the book, before you do that, subscribe to my channel to get more content like this, and of course go over to Twitter and Instagram and follow me at _GrantBurton to get more content like this. No, that's not where you go to get more content like this. You go to @the_GrantBurton, follow me on Twitter and Instagram to get all my up-to-date thoughts and opinions. Until next time though, thanks for watching. Now, full spoilers. So, Ken Adon, a character who's underutilized in this book, also dies in this book. It was a suitably emotional moment. It does dive into his backstory just before he dies, explaining what makes him tick, why he's doing everything. And yeah, it makes him a really well-rounded, really interesting, cool character. I think the best character in this book so far, and including the first book. So yeah, it was emotional when he died, especially when you consider the circumstances in which he died. He doesn't exactly go out like a hero or anything, he kind of just goes. And that's, yeah. Then at the end of the book, Irika Kell, after her secret about being involved with Operation Cinder and all of that stuff and all the Empire stuff, and that she only left the Empire because she was told to, that's revealed. So now everyone in the New Republic and the former rebellion now hates her, it seems. Although they barely get a chance to actually show that because all the chaos ensues the very moment everyone finds out this stuff and they don't have time to dwell on it. So what does Irika do? Well, at the end of the book she seems to go back to the Empire. And this brings up more questions than it does answers because, yeah, can she just return to the Empire? Won't they consider her to be a traitor? Will they trust her? I don't know. There's a lot going on here. Now, yes, of course, she returns to Soren Keyes, someone she knows really well, who probably does trust her, who does have an idea of what her true motivations probably, maybe are. I don't know. Maybe she's changed a bit. Maybe she's just there to try and redeem herself. Maybe she's going to sabotage the Empire, take down Soren Keyes or something. I don't know. But again, this situation brings up more questions than it does answers, and it makes for a very intriguing tease as to what's to come. So I kind of like that, but at the same time, I kind of don't because it doesn't quite make sense just yet. One of the things that's happening throughout this book is Soren Keyes keeps coming across this droid messenger, the red hooded droid that has the holographic face of Emperor Palpatine on it, that initially delivered the instructions for Operation Cinder. This messenger keeps popping up, and in different ways. Some of them are looking up to it as like a religious kind of prophetic figure and giving them like dreams, or like trying to pray to it, let's say, and almost like it's a good luck charm sort of thing. And it's weird and it's creepy, suitably so, and it constantly seems like they're teasing something with this droid. Is this droid suddenly going to have like another message from Palpatine at any point? Is this going to play into things later on? Is it going to tie into the events of Rise of Skywalker? Because we know Palpatine comes back. So yeah, I'm intrigued by this. Hopefully it does actually mean more than just like a little teaser. Hopefully it is more than just something that's teasing an annoyance Soren Keys that he keeps coming across it. Hopefully it's more than just a reminder of the past. And if it is, that would, in my opinion, make this whole trilogy worth it, because it makes it a key, important part of the Star Wars canon. At one point in this book, after all the chaos ensues, after the plan falls apart, Chasna Chaddock finds herself in a cult. One of the reasons I did not like this at all is because her backstory is that she was once part of a cult-like group. So it's really coincidental that this character in particular, who used to be in a cult, now finds herself in another cult. And yeah, it's really on the nose, really blatant, really forced, really coincidental. I did not like that. I think the author could have came up with something better. It also feels very rushed as well, because we got very little sense of how much time's actually passed, and it seems like it's at least a few days, maybe a few weeks, maybe even months. I don't really know. But the way in which this cult accepts her in, the way in which she ends up getting a name change and joining this cult to an extent, happens really fast, really quickly, to the point where either this cult is just made up of a bunch of idiots, because, well, it's a cult, so it probably is, or we're just expected to suspend our disbelief here. It's frustrating that this element's in the book. It feels unnecessary. I mean, it does feel necessary in the fact that it's drawn on her backstory and it's letting her deal with certain events from her past. That's great. But it could have just been handled a little better, I think. Final thing I'm going to talk about is again about the ending. This time Soren Keyes contacts Admiral Ray Sloan from the Aftermath trilogy. And this is really cool, because now it is tying into the larger Star Wars canon. Is this simply going to lead into the events of the Battle of Jakku? Probably. Either way, this is really cool and interesting, because I like the character of Admiral Sloan. She's no Grand Admiral Thrawn, but hey, that's what it is. She's there, and this instantly makes this book a little bit more integral, a little bit more important. Hopefully it ties in a big way into Ray Sloan and everything going on in the Unknown Regions and in the Battle of Jakku and so on and so forth. Hopefully this does mean that this trilogy is going to be worthwhile and it's not just a simple side story in Star Wars. Either way, on the whole, I think this book sets up a bunch of exciting possibilities for the final book in this trilogy, and I'm looking forward to the next book. And that's all I've got to say about this book. Shadowfall, do I recommend it? Yeah, I kind of do. It's alright. It's not as good as the first book, but it is setting things up for the final book. Hopefully that will be better. And yeah, that's all I've got to say about that. Until next time though, thanks for watching.